Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be ranking the top 24 overall players for 2024 fantasy football, going from players 1 all the way through 24 through my rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season, going in depth into each player. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you guys do hit that like button down below. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my top 24 overall players for 2024 fantasy football. We begin in the S tier of my overall rankings with Christian McCaffrey at number 1, running back of the San Francisco 49ers. Aggregate ADP from ESPN, Sleeper, MFL, Fantrax, and NFFC have him at pick number 1, Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 1, pick 1.3. Now, Christian McCaffrey is essentially the greatest running back we have ever seen in fantasy football. Last season, Christian McCaffrey finished with over 100 more PPR points than the running back 2, who was Breece Hall. He had 391.3 PPR points, and Breece Hall had 290.5. This guy averaged nearly 25 PPR points per game, 24.5 per game last season, and there is no reason to believe that Christian McCaffrey is going to take his foot off the gas. There are some rumors about Brandon Ayuk potentially getting traded, and while we will be talking about Brandon Ayuk later on in the video, ultimately, I don't think that will end up happening, but if it does, I think you can even be more confident than you already were in Christian McCaffrey, and I already believe supremely in Christian McCaffrey. I understand that the guy's getting up there in age, but at the end of the day, he is still the best all-around running back in the NFL on a team with Kyle Shanahan as the head coach, who is a run game guru with a solid offensive line. Christian McCaffrey is as easy of a pick as it gets, right? Last year, running back 1 in PPR, 1 in PPR points per game. He ranked 2nd in carries, 1st in rushing yards, 4th in targets, 3rd in receptions, 2nd in receiving yards, and 1st in total touchdowns with 21. Now, I know saying that a running back scoring 25 plus total touchdowns would seem like an impossibility, but honestly, if Christian McCaffrey did it, no one would bat an eye. That's just how good this guy is. Last year, in terms of efficiency, 5th in true yards per carry, 3rd in yards per touch, 1st in yards created, and 4th in dominator rating. He played in 16 games last year. As long as Christian McCaffrey is able to stay healthy, knock on wood, he is the surefire number 1 overall pick in 2024 fantasy football drafts. At number 2, we got Tyreek Hill. Now, there is definitely a debate to be had between Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb. For me, it's like splitting hairs, right? I have Tyreek Hill ranked above CeeDee Lamb by a very small margin. If you want to rank CeeDee Lamb over Tyreek Hill, that's fine with me. Aggregate ADP right now has Tyreek as the wide receiver 2 on Underdog Fantasy at pick 3.1, aggregate ADP pick number 3. So right now, CeeDee Lamb is going ahead of him. Tyreek Hill last season was the wide receiver 9 in PPR, the wide receiver 2 in PPR points per game, playing in 16 games. He got hurt up against the Tennessee Titans, missed the game up against the Jets, and then once he came back with that leg injury, he really wasn't the same. When you have an injury like that, and when you rely sheerly on speed, well, obviously he's a great route runner, but his best asset is the fact that he is incredibly fast. He's like a fucking Tesla, 0 to 60 in half a millisecond, right? So Tyreek Hill struggled towards the end of last season, but now fully healthy entering into 2024. This is a guy that could get 125, maybe even 130 receptions and could easily go over 2,000 receiving yards. Last year, he ranked 3rd in targets, 2nd in receptions, 1st in receiving yards, and 2nd in total touchdowns with 13. He ranked 5th in target accuracy, 1st in yards per route run, 1st in route win rate. Now, he did struggle with the drops last season, 7 drops, but ultimately that doesn't matter when you're going to see 160 plus targets basically guaranteed. I know Tyreek Hill did drop a couple of passes that would have resulted in touchdowns. As a Dolphins fan, some of those drops had me yelling at my screen aggressively, but at the end of the day, he is still, in my opinion, one of the best, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in the National Football League, and I believe that he will smash yet again this season. This is a guy that any given game could score 25, 30 plus PPR points. At number 3 to close out the S tier, we got CeeDee Lamb, the Lamster, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys, aggregate ADP pick number 2, Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 1 at pick 1.9. Wide receiver 1 last year in PPR and PPR points per game. 16 games played. He had 181 targets, 10.6 per game. Number 1 at wide receiver, ranking first in receptions as well, 135. 7.9 per game, 1,749 receiving yards, 102.9 per game. Number 2. And 14 total touchdowns, one more than Mr. Tyreek. First at wide receiver, ranking 5th in yards per route run, 9th in dominator rating, 9th in route win rate, and 6th in target accuracy from Mr. Dakota Prescott. The same argument that I just made for Tyreek Hill about how this guy is just going to be sucking in targets like his name was Kirby. CeeDee Lamb is going to do the exact same thing. He is on an offense just like Tyreek Hill, where the offense's focal point points directly at him. CeeDee Lamb is in an offense with a competent quarterback in Dak Prescott, who's going to force feed him the rock game in and game out. Just like Tyreek, he has that huge upside where he could catch 7, 8 balls in a game, right? Get 125 yards and 2 touchdowns and be the reason why you win that week in fantasy football. CeeDee Lamb, just like Tyreek, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And again, the margin of difference between the two for me is very, very slight. Moving to the A tier, this is a much bigger tier. In the S tier, we have 3 players. In this tier, the A tier, we have 5 players. So at number 4, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver of the Detroit Lions. Aggregate ADP pick number 5, tied with Jamar Chase, Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 5 at pick number 6. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown suffered an injury at the beginning of last season. He suffered an injury where the thing tore off the bone. If I suffered an injury where the doctor said, Nick, this tore off the bone, I would be crying in agony on the ground like a soccer player who got poked by someone's fucking pinky, right? But Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't give a shit about that. He plays the rest of the season, only missing 1 game, wide receiver 4 in PPR and 3 in PPR points per game. He ranked 5th in targets, 2nd in receptions, 3rd in receiving yards, and 5th in total touchdowns. 8th in target accuracy, 12th in true catch rate, 7th in yards per route run, and 5th in contested catch rate. Despite Amon-Ra St. Brown's size, he is an incredibly physical wide receiver who is going to do damage once he catches the pass. The guy also has some breakaway speed. He is the wide receiver number 1 on an offense that you know is going to throw the ball a ton. Dan Campbell likes running the ball, sure, but I honestly think it is a very safe bet to say that Jared Goff, as long as he stays healthy, will be top 5 in terms of passing attempts. Amon-Ra St. Brown, ever since he popped up off of the waiver wire a couple of years ago, has had the league just straight up butt fuck. This is a guy that is amazing basically every single game. And on an offense like the Detroit Lions that is going to be scoring a bunch of points, that's what leads me to having Amon-Ra St. Brown ranked ahead of Justin Jefferson as well as Jamar Chase. At number 5, we got Justin Jefferson, wide receiver of the cold like Minnesota Vikings, aggregate ADP pick number 4, Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 4, pick 5.3. Now, Justin Jefferson could receive a slight bump if Jordan Addison was suspended for a bunch of games or potentially the whole season. Knowing that Jordan Addison has a history of driving like he's in Fast and fucking Furious, chilling with Vin Diesel, that is not very promising considering he just got arrested for a DUI or a DWI. I think it's different depending in which state you live in. And based upon the fact that last season he was caught driving 100,000 miles an hour, reaching Mach 10 speed, does concern me that the NFL might end up throwing the book at him, giving him a much larger suspension. Maybe he doesn't get suspended at all. My thoughts is probably at least 2 or 3 games, which would bump up Justin Jefferson slightly for those games. But again, I'm already very high on Justin Jefferson. I don't really worry too much about JJ McCarthy being there. I think that Kirk Cousins is ultimately the better quarterback, but I don't think it's going to matter a ton because of how good Justin Jefferson is. There's an argument to be made that he is the best wide receiver in the National Football League. Last year, he was the wide receiver 33 in PPR because he only played in 10 games, but he was the wide receiver 5 in PPR points per game. He had 100 targets, 10 per game, 58 receptions, 5.8 per game, 1,074 receiving yards, 107.4 per game, and 5 total touchdowns, 29th at the wide receiver position. He ranked 69th, very nice, I like, in target accuracy, which obviously isn't the best. I think JJ McCarthy will be able to do something similar, maybe even better. 4th in yards per out run, 6th in yards per target, and 13th in yards per reception. The only negative argument I have seen online for Justin Jefferson is going to be the quarterback play by the Vikings, whether that is JJ McCarthy or mono man Sam Darnold. Again, would it be better if Justin Jefferson had Kirk Cousins or some other better quarterback? Of course it would. But it's not like those other quarterbacks are Desmond Ridder, who are essentially going to tie Justin Jefferson up, throw some fucking chains around him, and dump him into the river Soprano style. So I think Justin Jefferson will be able to tread that water of the quarterback play and be able to excel because he is one of the best receivers in the NFL. At number 6, we got Bijan Robinson, my running back number 2, running back of the Atlanta Falcons, aggregate ADP pick number 7, Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 2 at pick 6.9. Very nice. Shout out to Borat. Running back 9 last year in PPR and 16 in PPR points per game, tied with Derrick Henry. Now, I had hopes for Bijan Robinson entering into his rookie season. The Atlanta Falcons drafted him super highly. This was a guy, if you watched his tape at Texas, it would make your mouth water. It would make your nipples hard, right? That's just how much it would turn you on, right? Bijan Robinson looked downright incredible. He was looking like a man amongst boys, and he was able to do it in the NFL. I thought at least he would be able to, and he looked solid. But he was essentially thrown into the cuck chair by Arthur Smith. His usage was incredibly bad, right? You draft this guy super high and you're giving Tyler Algier touches over him. He only had 12.6 carries per game, 214 carries, 19th at running back, 976 rushing yards, 15th, though he did rank top 3 in targets, 86 targets, 5.1 per game, 58 receptions, 3.4 per game, 6th, 487 receiving yards, 28.6 per game, 4th, and 8 total touchdowns, 20th. He ranked 9th in yards per touch, 16th in yards per carry, 5th in yards created, and 16th in dominator rating. But I think that things are about to change in a huge way for Bijan Robinson. The way the offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons is giving Bijan some fellatio, right? He's talking up about how Bijan Robinson is going to be used in the Christian McCaffrey role. Now, we've heard guys in the past be talked about how, oh, they're going to get this player's role, right? This is going to be the next Christian McCaffrey, right? And it's a bunch of bullshit, a bunch of malarkey. But with Bijan Robinson, with how skilled he is, and with the fact that I think the Atlanta Falcons head coach and offensive coordinator are 90,000 IQ points smarter than that complete and utter dumbass Arthur Smith, I think that Bijan Robinson is going to get the correct usage to be able to potentially finish as the running back 1. I do not think Christian McCaffrey will have a 100-point lead on Bijan Robinson, but obviously anything is possible with how great Christian McCaffrey is. I think year number 2 with Bijan in Atlanta, now getting rid of the head coach and now having a quarterback that can actually fucking throw the ball instead of Desmond Ridder and the sacks of shit that was playing quarterback for Atlanta over the last couple of years. I mean, it's just been a disaster ever since Matty Ice Baby left Matt Ryan. So Bijan Robinson, my running back 2, pick number 6 for me. At number 7, we got Breece Hall, running back of the New York Jumbo Jets, aggregate ADP pick number 8, Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 3 at pick 8.1. Now, it is definitely a toss-up between Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson, but I do really believe that the Atlanta Falcons are going to go full-on Christian McCaffrey role with Bijan Robinson. They're not going to sub him out all the time and have Tyler Algier work in there, whereas I do think it is more likely that the Jumbo Jets, Robert Saleh, and friends use another running back in tandem with Breece Hall. Now, Breece Hall is still going to be the workhorse running back. He's still going to get a majority of the carries, but it wouldn't be that crazy if he got subbed out on the goal line, vultured a couple of touchdowns, and I don't think the Falcons are going to do that. Again, I still love Breece Hall. The New York Jets were a complete and utter laughingstock last season after Aaron Rodgers went down with that Achilles injury. That was the Achilles heel of the whole offense. They had no plan once he was gone. Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, nothing worked, but still Breece Hall was solid. Running back 2 in PPR, running back 6 in PPR points per game. He was essentially the whole offense because Garrett Wilson shriveled up like your cock when you go ahead and hop into some cold water, right? 17 games played for Breece Hall, 14th in carries, 13th in rushing yards, number 1 in targets with almost 195 targets, 76 receptions, number 1, 591 receiving yards, number 1, but only 9 touchdowns, 12th. Assuming Aaron Rodgers is able to stay healthy, and assuming that Aaron Rodgers is just halfway decent, then Breece Hall is going to be great in fantasy football. Efficiency-wise, he was great last year. Now, his true yards per carry number was kind of shit, 38th, but you can really blame the offensive production on that and the fact that the offensive line was a sieve. Will the offensive line be one of the best in the NFL this year? Probably not, but it should be at least slightly better. 11th in yards per touch, 3rd in yards created, and 1st in dominator rating. I believe in Breece Hall, just like I believe in Joe Hendry to anyone that watches NXT. So Breece Hall will be solid yet again. Again, it's just splitting hairs between him and Bijan Robinson. But again, I do lean slightly towards Bijan Robinson because I feel like he is going to get more of a workload in the Falcons offense compared to what Breece will get in the Jets offense. But maybe the Jets offense is just way better, and that is able to be the reason why Breece Hall is able to somersault over Bijan Robinson as the running back 2. To close out the A tier, we got Jamar with 2 R's, Chase, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals. Aggregate ADP, pick number 5, tied with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Underdog Fantasy ADP, pick 4.3, wide receiver number 3. Now, I know what you might be thinking, Nick, why is your ranking so much different than Underdog Fantasy? The reason why my ranking is so much different is just because I feel a little bit more confident in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson, because I do worry slightly. The fact is that Joe Burrow has been banged up a lot in his NFL career, and I'm as much of a doctor as Manuel Ferreira. I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, right? I am a Fugazi doctor, right? I'm not actually a doctor. But what I do know is one thing, though. Women, they come, they go. I know that Joe Burrow has a history of injuries. And if Joe Burrow gets hurt, will Jamar Chase be okay? Yes, but he's not going to finish as like a top 5 wide receiver. That's not all of the reason why I don't like Jamar Chase as much as the other guys, but that is one of the reasons, right? Jamar Chase averages 9.1 targets per game, whereas a guy like Justin Jefferson is at 10. Amon-Ra St. Brown was at 10.3. Again, that extra target could be what ends up per game elevating the other guys ahead of Jamar Chase. Again, this guy is fucking incredible. You turn the tape on and the blood goes rushing downstairs, right? It feels like you just had a Viagra. It's amazing to watch. Back at college, in the NFL, Jamar Chase is downright fucking amazing. He should finish as a top 6 wide receiver, and I feel very confident in saying that. I even have him ranked as my wide receiver number 5, so I feel a little bit better than that. But again, the fact that Joe Burrow does have that injury history does sway me slightly towards moving Jamar Chase down, and when push comes to shove, I feel as though T. Higgins, who had kind of a down year last year, is going to play a little bit better this season, be a little bit more involved, and that could end up being the deciding factor of Jamar Chase being the wide receiver 4 or 3 compared to the wide receiver 5. He ranked 11th in targets last year, 11th in receptions, 12th in receiving yards, 18th in total touchdowns. Again, this was a very up and down year for the Bengals. Joe Burrow starts the season banged up, and then he starts to play amazing, and then he gets fucking hurt, and everything goes downhill. Jamar Chase was still solid, though, throughout all of the trials and tribulations. 16 games played, 9th in target separation, 16th in yards per team pass attempt. Jamar Chase is downright amazing, but again, those are just the things that make me feel as though I will rank him at 8 instead of like 4 or 5. Moving now to the B tier, we begin with Saquon Barkley, running back of the Philadelphia Eagles. Aggregate ADP pick 15, Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 6 at pick 20.5. Now, a lot of people are scared of Saquon Barkley because Saquon Barkley let them down last season. Saquon Barkley did not play the best. He was the running back 9 in PPR points per game, 13 in PPR. So based upon where you drafted him, it kind of fucked you in the ass without the use of lube, right? It kind of sucked. Now, he wasn't so bad to where you would just hate the guy and never want to draft him again, but it wasn't the best, right? Saquon Barkley, 14 games played, 8th in carries, 16th in rushing yards, 15th in targets, 20th in receptions, 20th in receiving yards, and 11th in total touchdowns, though he did rank 3rd in dominator rating, 15th in breakaway run rate, and 18th in yards created. The reason why I like Saquon Barkley so much is he went from a Giants team that was on fire, right? It was, and not on fire the fun way, right? It's like that meme of that dog, the gif of the dog where his whole house is on fire. He's sitting there and it's like everything's fine. That's what the meme says, right? You know? And now he goes from a house that was on fire and there's no firefighters in sight to a mansion, a palatial estate of the Philadelphia Eagles. This is one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. And while Jalen Hurts is going to vulture some of the touchdowns, I think Saquon Barkley is going to get a lot of the rushing work. I think one of the main reasons why we saw Jalen Hurts get so many tush-push points for fantasy football, get so many tush-push touchdowns, is because the running back behind Jalen Hurts over the last couple of years hasn't been the biggest back, right? They don't have quads like Saquon Barkley, and I think there is a chance, while it might not be the biggest chance, I think there is a chance that some of those tush pushes will be snapped directly to Saquon Barkley. Again, going from New York to Philadelphia is a humongous big upgrade, and I think that Saquon Barkley is still one of the best running backs in the NFL. And I think, frankly, at pick number 15 in the middle of the second round, he's a complete and utter steal. So I got him ranked a lot higher than that. At number 10, we got Puka Nacua, wide receiver of the LA Rams, aggregate ADP pick 10. Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 7 at pick 10.4. Now, Puka Nacua is very interesting because Puka Nacua in his rookie year was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, right? And he came out of nowhere. John Cena style, right? Or like an RKO from Randy Orton, because no one really thought Puka Nacua would be, no one thought he'd be this great, right? I talked a little bit about Puka Nacua as the rumblings started, the rambling started to go his way. But like in week 1, we see Tutu Atwell go out there, play very solid. But after that, man, it was the Puka Nacua show in LA. Wide receiver 4 in PPR, 6 in PPR points per game. 17 games played, 159 targets, 9.4 per game, number 7. 105 receptions, 6.2 per game, number 8. 1,486 receiving yards, 87.4 per game, number 4. And 6 total touchdowns, 27th. I think that touchdown number could definitely increase. Now, the touchdown number in fantasy football in the NFL is like a fucking yo-yo for wide receivers, right? Puka Nacua could easily go out there and score 12 touchdowns next year. He could also maybe just get a little bit unlucky and score just 3 or 4. But I think he'll be around at least the 5 number due to how he's involved in this offense. He ranked 33rd in target accuracy, 6th in yards per route run, 9th in yards per team pass attempt, and 26th in dominator rating. If you remember last year, at least in my opinion, Stafford started a little bit slow, so even when Stafford wasn't really playing the best at the beginning of the season, Puka Nacua was able to ball out regardless. Cooper Kupp returned, and Puka Nacua was still playing out of his mind. Now, I will note, I think that a healthy Cooper Kupp is going to be more involved than he was last season, and he is going to do more with the targets that he receives because he's not coming off of a fucking hamstring strain, which really hurts wide receiver or running back production if you get hurt right before the start of the season. Puka Nacua, though, is still the 1A in this offense. I know he's not the prototypical build of this alpha wide receiver, at least in my mind. When I think of an alpha wide receiver, I think of someone more built like fucking DK Metcalf compared to a guy built like Puka Nacua. But no shame here. Puka Nacua is still a absolute fucking beast, and I think that he's going to be able to finish as a top 8 wide receiver pretty reliably. I got him as my wide receiver number 6. At number 11, we got Jahmyr Gibbs, running back of the Detroit Lions. Aggregate ADP, pick number 11. Underdog Fantasy, running back 4, pick number 13. So I got him right where he's ranked in aggregate ADP. Last season, Jahmyr Gibbs in his rookie year finishes as a top 10 running back, both in PPR and in PPR points per game, running back 8 in PPR points per game, running back 10 in PPR. He played in 15 games last season with just 3 starts. And while I do believe they are going to cut out more of a piece of the offensive pie for Jahmyr Gibbs, I still don't think that David Montgomery is just going to be completely out of the picture, right? They're not going to just... You ever seen where it's like, there's a picture of like a guy and his family, right? And he breaks up with his girl and they Photoshop the girl out somehow, right? They're not going to just magically turn David Montgomery into the X and Photoshop him out of the scenario, right? David Montgomery's still going to get used, and he's still going to get used, especially on the goal line. And while that will suck at times, I think that with more usage and with the fact that running backs typically in their second year, that's when they really break out, that's when they really start to ball out, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the perfect case of that. Again, I never see Jahmyr Gibbs in a scenario when I rub the crystal ball where he's getting a Christian McCaffrey workload, right? Where he's seeing so many rushes, right? 17 rushes per game for McCaffrey. I don't see that happening. I just do not see that being possible, but I do think that he's going to be able to increase his 12.1 carries per game. I think he could get closer to 14 or 15. I think because of that, the rushing yards will increase 63 per game. He ranks 17th in rushing yards. And if he's seeing a similar amount of targets, 4.7 targets per game, 71 targets, 8th at running back, 52 receptions, 3.5 per game, 9th, 316 receiving yards, 21.1 per game, 16th, and 11 total touchdowns, 9th, right? If the targets and receptions stay similar, the receiving yards maybe go slightly up, and he finishes with 10 plus touchdowns, he should be very solid. If something was to happen to David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs has the ability in that time of David Montgomery being gone to be a top 3, top 2, maybe even the running back 1 over a run of multiple games. And knock on wood, we don't root for injuries because I do like David Montgomery for fantasy. If David Montgomery was to miss a lot of the season, maybe he misses the remainder of the season from when he gets hurt, then you will be just so happy that you drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. And even if that doesn't happen, right, David Montgomery stays healthy, again, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to see more touches in a high value offense with an amazing offensive line. I love the upside that Jahmyr Gibbs possesses, but you could make the argument that the player I've ranked 13th, Jonathan Taylor, who we're going to be talking about in a couple of seconds, that you might want to rank Jonathan Taylor higher than Jahmyr Gibbs, and I wouldn't really argue with you too much on that. But sandwiched in between the two running backs is Marvin Harrison, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals. Aggregate ADP, pick 14. Underdog Fantasy ADP, wide receiver 9 at pick 13.5. Now, I don't want to sound like a broken record when I say this because I talked about Marvin Harrison in my wide receiver video from 2 days ago where I talk about my favorite wide receiver in every single round. Marvin Harrison Jr. was my favorite wide receiver in round number 2 because I got him with that first round grade, right? Pick number 12. Marvin Harrison Jr. is, while I understand he is a rookie, we just saw a rookie in Puka Nacua finish as a top 6 wide receiver. So you better believe Marvin Harrison Jr. can do the exact same thing. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be seeing an ass load of targets every single game because he is by clearly the best wide receiver in this Arizona Cardinals offense. And Kyler Murray is a competent quarterback who will know that he needs to feed Marvin Harrison the ball. This is another guy where you turn the tape on and you get very, very excited. This is a guy that is always able to get open at the college level, and that is going to translate to the NFL level. He lives up to the Marvin Harrison name. Last year at Ohio State, 12 games played, 117 targets for 67 receptions and 1,211 yards, 18.1 yards per reception, and 14 total touchdowns. Back-to-back seasons with 1,200 plus receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. This guy can play ball. The only argument I see, again, this is where I'll sound like a broken record, right? The only argument I see against Marvin Harrison Jr. that I'm seeing online is that Marvin Harrison Jr. is a rookie. You can't draft a rookie wide receiver in the second round. Well, obviously, you loved picking up Puka Nacua or drafting him in the last round of your fantasy football draft last year. If you had drafted Puka Nacua in the second round, guess what? You would have been happy. Now, you didn't have to do it, obviously, because he wasn't even drafted in a majority of leagues. But if Puka Nacua was a second-round draft pick last year, he would have paid off dividends, right? He would have paid off heavily, and I think Marvin Harrison will pay off in the second round. I got him as pick number 12. At number 13, Jonathan Taylor, running back of the Indianapolis Colts, aggregate ADP pick 13. Underdog Fantasy ADP pick 16.2. Running back number 5. If you guys have enjoyed today's video thus far, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. While you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure to leave a like on today's video. So last year starts off weird, right? Jonathan Taylor is hurt with the ankle injury, but there's also this contract dispute. Him and Jim Irsay have to meet on like some RV. It seems like Jonathan Taylor might get traded. As a Dolphins fan, I was getting a little bit bricked up thinking about him on the Dolphins, but it was just fine and dandy with Raheem Mostert and with A-Chain, but none of those guys are built like Jonathan Taylor, so I was kind of hoping we would get him. At the end of the day, Jonathan Taylor signs his John Hancock on a new contract, and everyone's happy. He comes back. He's the running back 12 in PPR points per game, but he's the running back 33 in PPR because he only played in 10 games and had 7 starts because they were using Zach Moss a decent amount. Missed the first 4 games with that ankle injury. Again, the contract dispute as well. Who knows how real that ankle injury was. And then sometime in the middle of the season with a torn thumb ligament. He ranked 34th in carries, 16.9 per game, 74.1 rushing yards per game, 2.3 targets, 1.9 receptions, 15.3 receiving yards, 8 total touchdowns, 20th. He ranked 6th in dominator rating. Now, Jonathan Taylor, in my opinion, isn't even like a Saquon Barkley level receiving back, but I do think he could get a similar amount of targets as a guy like Saquon Barkley would get in New York. I don't think Anthony Richardson is the most likely quarterback, though, to sit there and check down the ball 4, 5, 6+ times a game, but I don't think that's going to matter. I understand that Jonathan Taylor never even, at least off of my memory, really played with Anthony Richardson because Anthony Richardson only played like the first 4 or 5 games of last season when Jonathan Taylor was gone. But people are scared of Jonathan Taylor because of Anthony Richardson. He's this great rushing quarterback. Well, guess fucking what? Zach Moss had defenses in the camel crutch with Anthony Richardson playing. So I'm not really too worried about Jonathan Taylor. Just a couple of years ago, everyone was fondling this guy's balls, that he's the next best running back in the NFL. Seems like people forgot about that because of the last 2 years. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, I still believe heavily in Jonathan Taylor. I believe in Shane Steichen as well. That is a guy that in Philadelphia had Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders as a tandem, putting defenses in the Eiffel Tower together. So Jonathan Taylor should be just fine, if not a top 3 or maybe even the best running back. Now, I don't think he'll be the number 1 running back, but I do think that's in the realm of possibilities. At number 14, we got A.J. Brown, wide receiver of the Philadelphia Eagles, aggregate ADP pick 9, wide receiver 6 on Underdog Fantasy ADP pick 8.8. Now, I am definitely lower on A.J. Brown compared to consensus, and that is just because I feel as though this team will be a lot more offensive, will be a lot more effective in the red zone rushing the ball. I think, when you hand the ball to Swift and he falls over on the 1 or 2 yard line, or they're maybe not able to get in the past, when maybe the tush push didn't work, and with the fact that Jason Kelce is gone, I don't really think they're going to be doing as many tush pushes, which is, again, more points for Saquon Barkley. Point to Gryffindor. I think that they're going to be a little bit more effective running the ball without Jalen Hurts in the red zone, like being confident running the ball on the 10-yard line, the 20-yard line, not just 1 yard out. And I think that could hurt A.J. Brown's touchdown upside. He was already a guy that only scored 7 total touchdowns last year. I also think that Devontae Smith is a guy who in prior years was more consistent and a little bit more involved. And I think that it's very likely that the switch flips back towards his direction. Now, A.J. Brown is still the number 1 and Devontae Smith is the number 2. But I just think that A.J. Brown might fall off a little bit from last year, right? Wide receiver 8 in PPR points per game, wide receiver 5 in PPR. Again, this guy is still one of the best receivers in the NFL. So from my takeaway, or your takeaway from what I'm saying, is not that I think A.J. Brown's a bad player. I just think the surrounding situation around him might lead to him not being as involved and thus not being a great first-round pick. But he falls into the early second round, then I'm perfectly fine drafting A.J. Brown. I think that if you guys are in more of a running back heavy room, maybe instead of 4 running backs in the first round, you see 5 or 6, then it's very likely that you could get A.J. Brown at pick number 14, where I'm happy to draft him. 7.4 target accuracy last year, 10th, because a lot of people think that Jalen Hurts is just some garbage can quarterback who's just a running back rushing merchant. He really isn't. 9th in yards per out run, 7th in yards per team pass attempt, and 15th in dominator rating. He is a guy that is a little bit less consistent, in my opinion. I don't think he'll be one of the most consistent wide receivers in fantasy football this year. I think he's going to be a little bit more up and down, but that high upside is still worthy of that second round pick. Again, I just don't love him in the first round. Moving now to the C tier at number 15 and talking about a pick that I don't love in the first round, that would be Garrett Wilson, wide receiver of the New York Jumbo Jets. Aggregate ADP pick number 12, Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 8 at pick 10.8. Now, with the fact that the birdies are chirping and telling us that maybe Davante Adams gets traded to the Jets, that would be a cock block for Garrett Wilson. Now, again, Nick, Garrett Wilson's still amazing. You remember him in college? You remember how good he was? He was just dragged down heavily by the quarterback play last year, and I agree. He was dragged down by the quarterback play. He was great in college. But what I will tell you is that if Davante Adams comes there, Aaron Rodgers is going to go back to his ex, his old friend, right? He's going to fold origami style, right? And just lean more towards Davante Adams because they have that amazing chemistry. Now, what I will tell you is I don't think that is the most likely scenario to happen, right? Where Adams gets traded to the Jets, but it is possible, right? I'm not going to completely rule that out. That'd be like saying, hey, I also don't think that Brandon Ayuk, who's ranked at number 19, is going to get traded to either the Steelers or the Commanders or whatever team you want to trade him to, right? I think more than likely, he just stays there and plays this season, and then he's gone next year. Or maybe he plays so well, they end up deciding to pay him. I also just read a report, my Twitter, my phone, beep, beep, it beeped, and it said that allegedly the Patriots are looking at Brandon Ayuk, but we'll talk more about Brandon Ayuk a little bit later when we get to him. Now, when it comes to Garrett Wilson, again, I don't think the most likely scenario that plays out is Davante Adams gets traded to the Jets, but I do think that is a situation that is possible. Garrett Wilson ended up being a big, fat bust last season, but again, I'm not going to sit here and just blame him for all of it because ultimately, the target accuracy wasn't there, 76th in target accuracy, and he ranked 11th in total route wins, so he was able to get open. It just didn't really work out for him. He got 168 targets, 9.9 per game, 4th at wide receiver, but that only turned into 95 receptions, 13th at wide receiver, and 1,042 receiving yards, 22nd, with just 3 total touchdowns, 58th. So most likely, as long as Aaron Rodgers returns and is fine, then Garrett Wilson's going to pay off in the second round. I just don't know if I love it in the first round because, again, I just kind of have some sticker shock with drafting multiple Jets players inside the first round. And I also think the fact that Aaron Rodgers is as ancient as he is, like fucking King Viserys, I am a little bit worried about Garrett Wilson. Again, am I so worried that I wouldn't draft him? No, but I just don't prefer drafting him in the first round. I would hope he would fall into the second round for me to feel more comfortable drafting him. Again, because of Aaron Rodgers' age, Aaron Rodgers' injury, and because of the fact that I think there's a chance that Davante Adams gets traded there. At number 16, we got Derrick Henry, D-Rock Henry, Tractor Cedo, running back of the Ravens. Aggregate ADP pick 27, Underdog Fantasy ADP pick 9, or pick 30.1. Running back number 9. Now, Derrick Henry is a guy you don't have to draft in the top 24 because he should be available for you at the beginning or potentially the middle of the third round. And the reason behind that, I'm not too sure. I think people are worried about Derrick Henry's age, and they're worried about Lamar Jackson stealing some touchdowns. The Baltimore Ravens in the Lamar Jackson era have never had a running back that is as skilled as Derrick Henry. I get that he's getting a little bit older and he wasn't the best last season, but the reason why he wasn't the best last season is because the offensive line play in Tennessee wasn't the best, and the fact that the offense as a whole was down bad in games, getting bent over a table, smacked on the ass. Derrick Henry struggled because when that was happening, they had to throw the ball and they would have to take Derrick Henry off the field. Derrick Henry is not some crazy pass catcher, but he has gotten better over the last couple of years. Never going to be a guy getting like 50 targets, but I do think he could recreate 30-ish targets like he had last season. 280 carries last year, number one, 1,167 rushing yards, number two, 68.6 per game, and he scored 12 total touchdowns. Sticks that running back, despite the fact that he was on the Titans and he was getting a little bit older, and people get their panties in a bunch about Derrick Henry. 10th in yards created, 9th in evaded tackles, 8th in breakaway run rate, and 5th in dominator rating. The Baltimore Ravens are another one of those teams that just loves to run the ball. Harbaugh salivates thinking about running the rock. He dreams of running the rock. Some of us dream of sleeping with Sidney Sweeney. The Harbaugh brothers dream about some smash mouth football, and that is exactly what they are going to do with Derrick Henry, just like with Saquon Barkley. It's going to be frustrating at times, right? When Lamar fake handoff to Derrick Henry, there's no one on the left. Lamar runs to the left, does the do-si-do into the end zone, hits the fucking Gangnam Style running into the end zone because there's no one around him. Touchdown, right? It's easy. But there's also going to be times where the defense thinks Lamar is the ball, and then Derrick Henry runs in unguarded, right? Normally, he has to run through every single defender on the defense. He has to stiff arm a Bills player straight to Middle Earth to score a touchdown, but I think it's going to be a lot easier here in Baltimore. I think he could easily be a top 5 back. This is a guy that could legitimately score 20 touchdowns this year, and it wouldn't be all that shocking. At number 17, we got Josh Jacobs. Now, I have moved Josh Jacobs down slightly because of the fact that the Green Bay Packers are fondling the balls of Marshawn Lloyd, the backup running back in Green Bay. They're talking him up, and we all know that even though in the past Aaron Jones way better than A.J. Dillon, the team did try to sneak A.J. Dillon in there all the time, and it was just fucking annoying as a Aaron Jones owner, right? If you drafted Aaron Jones, sometimes you're pissed off because of that. Similar things going to happen with Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd, and maybe even some of A.J. Dillon, even though that guy reeks to high heaven. Josh Jacobs, currently coming off the board at pick 26, so there's another guy you can wait until the third round to draft. On Underdog, he goes at pick 53, which just makes no sense to me. I understand that Josh Jacobs is never going to get the workload that he got in Viva Las Vegas, right? He's never going to be getting 18, 19, 20 carries in a lot of these games, right? Averaging 17.9 carries per game last year. He ranked 11th in carries despite only playing 13 games. He ranked 24th in rushing yards because of the fact that the defense loaded the box. They ranked first in defenders in the box, Josh Jacobs did. So they loaded the box up for Josh Jacobs, and obviously that made him be a little bit less successful, but he ranked 7th in dominator rating, and I don't think they'll be loading the box as much up against the Packers because you got to worry about Jordan Love Me Tender, Love Me Sweet, and defenses didn't have to worry too much about Jimmy Garoppolo or Aiden O'Connell, whoever was under center at the time. So Jacobs played 13 games last year. He missed the end of the season with a quad strain. He had 54 targets, 37 receptions, both inside the top 24, 296 receiving yards, 19th, and 6 total touchdowns, 24th. The touchdown number is going to greatly increase in Green Bay. Even if the workload isn't as high, and I know for sure it is not going to be as high, the effectiveness of the carries will be increased. The upside of the carries will be higher because he's going to get a lot more red zone opportunities because unlike the Raiders, who at times where you're moving the football at the speed of a snail running, the Green Bay Packers are going to be able to move the ball at the speed of the first time you had sex and you nut in like 0.7 seconds. So Josh Jacobs is going to be successful in Green Bay. I moved Derrick Henry ahead of him, and I've even considered moving Pacheco ahead of him due to workload concerns. But ultimately, again, I think while the touches won't be as voluptuous, there will be more high value touches and targets compared to what we saw in Viva Las Vegas. At number 18, we got Drizzy Drake London, wide receiver of the Atlanta Falcons. Aggregate ADP, pick 18. Underdog Fantasy ADP, wide receiver 10 at pick 14.6. Now, drafting Drake London inside of the second round on paper sounds disgusting, right? But sometimes it also feels right? It's like when you see your stepsister stuck inside a washing machine. Sometimes you got to take advantage of that. And obviously, guys, that's a joke. Just so you know, I don't think you should be having sex with your stepsister. Just so you know, just so you guys know. But Drake London. So the reason why it feels gross is because Drake London has, for his NFL career, not been very successful. Now, is that because Drake London is bad? Of course not. It's because Desmond Ridder sucks cock to high heaven. He is terrible, okay? 16 games played for Drake London and Marcus Mariota and stuff. Like, it just wasn't great for Drake London. 109 targets, 6.8 per game, 24th. 69 receptions, 4.3 per game, 30th. 905 receiving yards, 56.6 per game, 30th. 2 total touchdowns, 76th. Now, some worries for Drake London would be, for one, maybe Kirk Cousins comes back and isn't the same. Possible. Maybe Kyle Pitts gets a lot more involved, and that sucks away some target share from Drake London, which I don't think will happen. Another concern would be that Darnell here comes. The Mooney is by far and away the best wide receiver 2 that Drake London has to compete with, and maybe he gets enough targets to where it kind of fucks over Drake London. At the end of the day, the way I view Drake London right now in the middle of July is that he is a very high upside player, because if everything goes right, because of the skill Drake London has, he could be a top 5 and easily be a top 12 receiver, right? But there are risks. Like Kirk Cousins, like the fact that maybe Kyle Pitts turns into the Kyle Pitts that we thought he always was, and he's getting a crazy amount of targets. He's stealing all the touchdowns. Maybe Bijan's stealing all the touchdowns, and Drake London scores only like 3 or 4 touchdowns. He gets iced out, and he falls greatly from where he's being drafted, right? He ends up being a bust. I could definitely see that happening. But to me, while he is a little bit risky, and maybe some of you guys prefer to be a little bit more safe in the second round, I think that's very fair to be safe. But for me, I'm willing to take the risk because, again, I believe in Drake London's talent. And I believe that Kirk Cousins is smart enough to feed this guy the ball. Now, I don't think Drake London is as skilled as Justin Jefferson, but I think it's very possible they could get that kind of a heavy dosage of targets. And again, the new head coach being there, the offensive coordinator, all of that points towards Drake London having a much better season. At number 19, second to last guy in the C tier, we got Brandon Ayuk of the 49ers. At least right now, he's of the 49ers. Aggregate ADP pick 21. Can you do something for me? Our Fantasy ADP wide receiver 13 at pick 18.7. Now, Brandon Ayuk is one of the most efficient wide receivers in the NFL. Second in yards per target, second in yards per reception, 9th in true catch rate, and 3rd in yards per route run. That could miraculously change based upon how they look to deploy him on a different team. More than likely, though, I think he's not going to get traded, and I think he will be a San Francisco 49er. While he might not be happy and he might be pouting on the sideline because he didn't get to be a part of the receiver show like Debo or George Kittle, at the end of the day, Brandon Ayuk is still one of the best receivers in the NFL. He ranked 15th in PPR points per game and 14th in PPR, and I think he is going to get better because I think his target share is going to increase. He played in 16 games, getting 6.6 targets per game. I think that could go higher. 105 targets, 30th at wide receiver. 75 receptions, 4.7 per game, 24th. 1,342 receiving yards, 7th, 83.9 per game, so 30th most targets, 24th most receptions, but 7th most yards, and 18 total touchdowns, or 18th in total touchdowns. He scored 7 touchdowns. He scored 18 touchdowns. He would have been one of the best receivers in fantasy, and I don't think that's going to happen with McCaffrey there. But right now, Brandon Ayuk's a guy that I'm still fine drafting at the end of the second round, because I think he'll be a 49er. We're going to have to put an asterisk on his ranking, though, put a pin in this, because if he gets traded, his ranking is going to change. Maybe he gets traded to a situation where I think, hey, shit's going to be sweet for Brandon Ayuk, things are going to get better. It's great that he gets traded to this team. Or maybe he gets traded to, like, the Patriots, and it's like, okay, now I don't want anything to do with Brandon Ayuk in the second round, and then, like, if he gets traded, Debo's value would change, right? McCaffrey, you might be even more confident, like I said, than you already were. Kittle, you'd have to move up the rankings, right? So that does really change things right now for me, right? If something was to change here for Ayuk's landing spot, what team he's on, then of course we would have to adjust. But right now, he feels like a pretty reliable guy that you can draft outside of the top 12 receivers. That could definitely be a top 12 guy. I mean, he was the wide receiver 14 last year, 15 in PPR points per game. And if he just sees a slight uptick in targets with how efficient he is in San Francisco, I think Brock Purdy's going to be Brandon Ayuk's going to be just fine with Brock Purdy. A lot of people don't like Brock Purdy. They say, oh, he's just like Jimmy Garoppolo. Dude, Jimmy Garoppolo wouldn't even be able to hold Brock Purdy's jockstrap. Let's be honest. Brock Purdy's way better than Jimmy Garoppolo. You should thank us, 49ers fan. I'm a Dolphins fan. I'm wearing my Tua Anon shirt right now. Got Dolphins logo in the background lighting up that you can't see. But above that, a picture of my fiance painted, shout out to her, of the Dolphins logo. The Dolphins knocked Jimmy Garoppolo out and brought them Brock Purdy. So, and basically Brock Purdy, he hit us with a fucking steel chair to the dome. He hit us with a ladder, everything. He laid us out on a table, jumped off a ladder, hit a fucking moonsault, landed on us, destroyed the table. It was so bad, dude. I remember that game. We scored on the first play. We threw the ball to the receiver that's now in the Buffalo Bills, I think. Maybe it was River Craycraft. I don't remember, but it was first play of the game, touchdown, or second play of the game. And then ever since that, it was downhill for the Dolphins in that season. And then Tua got hurt after that. It was a disaster. So Brock Purdy started the downfall of the Dolphins, but that has nothing to do with what the fuck we're talking about here. I don't know why I just rambled about that. We're 50 minutes into the video, Nick, you jackass. So Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver of the 49ers. I like Brandon Ayuk. I just think he's a very reliable player. And again, the efficiency is off the chain. At number 20, we have Isaiah Pacheco, running back of the Kansas City Chiefs, aggregate ADP pick 31, Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 10, pick 42.6. So another guy you can get in the third round. So you don't even really have to draft him this early. So Isaiah Pacheco is a guy last season that you could describe his season in two ways, right? You could describe it as basically a majority of the season where he was solid, and then the end of the season into the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl where he was amazing, where they started to use him more in the receiving game. Once they started to target him more, obviously his fantasy football value increases because targets are so valuable in fantasy football and PPR and in half PPR. Despite the fact that he wasn't the best all season long, he was the running back 14 in PPR points per game and the running back 15 in PPR. 14 games played with 13 starts, and I will note that for the regular season, a lot of the regular season, the Chiefs didn't look like the Chiefs that we're used to. Like, okay, this is finally the year where the Chiefs don't make it far in the playoffs, right? And then they win the fucking Super Bowl. We're all idiots, right? 205 carries, 22nd at running back, 18th in rushing yards, 22nd in targets, 17th receptions, 22nd in receiving yards, and 12th in total touchdowns. He ranked 2nd in catch rate, 11th in breakaway run rate, 15th in dominator rating, and 12th in yards created. Again, the reason why I like Pacheco so much is because I know that the team is going to push for him to be more utilized in the receiving game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire sure can catch passes, but I think Pacheco can do it better. 2nd in catch rate, like we said. Jerick McKinnon is now gone on the street begging for money, right? So Isaiah Pacheco is in the driver's seat as the clear lead back on one of the best offenses in the NFL. Now, I know there is the worry about what happens to Rashee Rice, but ultimately they still have Hollywood Brown, Travis fucking Kelce, and they still have Xavier Worthy. So I think the offense in the regular season is going to be significantly better than what we saw out of the Kansas City Chiefs last season. That we are going to see Isaiah Pacheco more involved in the receiving game, and he's also like a 14, 15, 16 carry guy per game. So if he's getting more targets, and if the Chiefs are able to be more effective overall, they're able to move the ball more effectively, that gives more upside for Isaiah Pacheco to score more touchdowns. So I think the addition of Hollywood Brown, the addition of Xavier Worthy is going to be a recipe of sugar, spice, and everything nice, Powerpuff Girls style for the Kansas City Chiefs offense. Patrick Mahomes is still, in my opinion, the clear best quarterback in the NFL. While he might not be the best for fantasy because he doesn't run the ball as much, that doesn't really matter because we're talking about how Patrick Mahomes in real life will help out Pacheco for fantasy. To put a bow on this discussion on Isaiah Pacheco, at the end of last season, week 12 against the Raiders, he gets 25 PPR points. Week 13 against the Packers, 21 points. Comes back against the Raiders, 10. But then in the NFL playoffs, we start to see the targets start to matter. Like at the end of the season, 5, 3, 4 receptions to close out the season against the Raiders, the Packers, and the Raiders again. Then in the playoffs, we see up against the Dolphins, 1 reception, then 1 reception against the Bills, but then 4 against the Ravens, 6 against the 49ers. We know the targets are going to come more his way this season, and I am very excited to see a even better Chiefs team for the regular season and how that will affect Pacheco. And obviously, it's going to positively affect it. Moving now to the D tier, the last 4 guys of today's video. At number 21, we got DJ Moore, wiki, of the Chicago Bears. Another guy you can wait to draft into the 3rd round. Aggregate ADP pick 33. Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 22 at pick 30.4. Now, my ranking of DJ Moore compared to his ADP, I have him way ahead of ADP. Because I loved what I saw to DJ Moore last season. Wide receiver 6 in PPR and 9 in PPR points per game. People are going to be scared of DJ Moore because they drafted Rome Odunze and they bring in Keenan Allen. I think more than likely, Keenan Allen, while I don't think he's completely washed and I don't think he's halfway into the retirement home, I just think he's not going to be as good as he used to be. And I think that DJ Moore is still the number 1 receiver on this offense. DJ Moore put up a top 10 PPR points per game and PPR season, wide receiver 6 in PPR, 9 in PPR points per game with Justin Fields and Tyson Bagent. I get, Caleb Williams never played in the NFL. He paints his fingernails. He's a little bit fruity, this, that, and the other thing. Who gives a shit? I understand that it's his first year, but Caleb Williams wipes his ass with guys like Justin Fields and Tyson Bagent. So I think DJ Moore could definitely be a top 10 receiver yet again. 136 targets last year, 8 per game, 14th. 96 receptions, 5.6 per game, 12th. 1,364 receiving yards, 80.2 per game, number 6. 9 total touchdowns, 10th. 35th in target accuracy, 8th in contested catch percentage, and 4th in dominator rating. I get maybe he gets slightly less targets because they have these other guys in the offense. But the targets are going to be more valuable coming from Caleb compared to the other guys. The touchdown upside might even be increased because the offense might be able to move the ball up the field more effectively, thus giving more chances for DJ Moore to catch the ball in the red zone. Plus, the Bears don't really have, besides, I guess, Roshan would be like the goal line back on the team. Like, DeAndre Swift isn't, like we talked about this with Saquon Barkley, he's not built like a fucking goal line back. So I think DJ Moore is a lot safer than people are talking about. I get that he is kind of risky, right? Like, if you compare DJ Moore to Davante Adams is miles and miles and miles ahead in terms of safety. But I don't think in terms of upside, Davante Adams is close, and that's why I have him ranked at 24th. At number 22, we got Devin 2 Chains, running back of the Miami Dolphins, aggregate ADP, pick 23, tied with Travis Etienne. Underdog Fantasy ADP, running back 7 at pick 24. Underdog Fantasy is the sponsor of today's video. If you guys are new to Underdog Fantasy and you click on the link in the video description or use promo code Notorious when you deposit, you will get a first-time deposit bonus of up to $250 plus a special pick. If you don't know what Underdog Fantasy is, it is a best ball drafting platform. It is my favorite way to prepare for fantasy football drafts by drafting because you're not drafting up against the computer, you're drafting up against real people. Now, it is going to be a little bit different than your regular at-home league because wide receivers go significantly higher, and the strategy is a little bit different, but I do think it's a great way to practice, and they have tournaments as low as $3 buy-ins, up to $100, $1,000 buy-ins. The Best Ball Mania 5 tournament, $25 to enter, $1.5 million to first place. If you guys want to check out Underdog Fantasy, I will be doing more streams over on there. I did a stream last Saturday, so if you want to watch that, figure out what Underdog Fantasy is all about, you can check that out. And if you want to draft with me, I'll be doing a bunch of those streams. So make sure you guys sign up using promo code Notorious. If you have a gambling problem, make sure you call 1-800-GAMBLER. So Devin A. Chain last season, I know his name is pronounced a little bit different than that, and I had it right last season, but I got fucking Men in Black where they put the thing up into your face and it like removes your memory. It's just fallen out of my memory. I don't remember exactly how to pronounce it. Now, a billion people are going to say in the comments, Nick, it's actually pronounced like this. Frankly, it doesn't fucking matter. I've been pronouncing people's names wrong for a while. I respect Devin A. Chain, Devin A. Chan, or however the fuck you say it, but Devin A. Chain, running back of the Dolphins. Very effective last season. First in yards per touch, third in juke rate, first in breakaway run rate, second in true yards per carry. Do I think he'll be as effective this year? Of course not, because 6.6 true yards per carry is fucking crazy. But could it be 5.5? Yeah. Shout out LA Knight. I think that just like Jahmyr Gibbs, the argument here is that Mostert's not going to disappear. He's not going to fall out of favor in the offense. They're still going to use him, but they're going to use Devin A. Chain more. And just like Jahmyr Gibbs, second-year running back, that's when the running backs start to really take over, in my opinion. 11 games played last year with 4 starts. He missed a few games with a knee sprain mid-season. He ranked 47th in carries, but he was 25th in rushing yards. So 103 carries, 800 rushing yards. 37 targets, 27 receptions, 197 receiving yards, 11 total touchdowns, 9th. Tua Tagovailoa is not really a check down merchant. He's not a check down Charlie like Derek Carr to Alvin Kamara, but he'll check down the ball. I think A-Chain could see 50 targets. It wouldn't be that crazy. Mostert's going to get his as well. A-Chain, the reason why you should draft him is because of the upside he possesses. Again, he's definitely much more risky when you compare him to Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, because their weekly output is going to be steady. A-Chain might have a game with 8 points, and then the next week, fucking kick down the door, FBI open up, drop 30, 35 fantasy points, right? I think the consistency will be a little bit better, so he probably won't even get down to 8 unless the game goes really wrong, but you get my point, right? He's more boom or bust. Boom! Shout out to the Costco guys, but Devin A-Chain, I think, is going to be even more involved in the offense this year. He has the upside to be a top 5 running back. He was a top 5 running back in PPR points per game last season. I think he could easily do it this year. If something was to happen to Mostert, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries. Devin A-Chain's blasting off through the moon. At number 23, we got Nico Collins, another guy that I just like more than most people. Aggregate ADP pick 28. Underdog Fantasy wide receiver 12, pick 17.4. The reason why I like Nico Collins more than most people, is because most people are nervous about Stephon Diggs, and they're worried about Tank Dell completely sinking the battleship of Nico Collins. For me, while I get that the addition of Stephon Diggs definitely isn't a huge positive for Nico Collins, I still think Nico Collins will be the number 1 receiver on the team. He is one of the most efficient receivers in the NFL, just like Brandon Ayuk. 3rd in fantasy points per target, 5th in EPA, expected points added, 10th in yards per team pass attempt, 3rd in yards per target, 9th in yards per reception, 2nd in yards per out run, and 10th in target quality rating. CJ Stroud in his 2nd year, I don't think is going for a sophomore slump. I think he's going to be swinging his fucking cock around like a lasso and smacking the defenses up Drake style. So I think that Nico Collins is in for another big season. He was the wide receiver 7 in PPR points per game, 12 in PPR, and he only had technically 10 starts last season, 15 games played. Nico Collins is a guy that I gave some Suka Lamink to a couple of years ago, and by a couple of years ago, I mean in 2022 when he was playing with Davis Mills. I liked the upside. I liked what I saw on tape. I liked the measurables, and we saw some of the flashes, some of the upside, but it wasn't fully there, right? It was like a tease. But then in 2023, in fantasy drafts, I'm banging the drum. Like, you know what? He's going to do better with CJ Stroud because Davis Money Mills fucking sucks. He's going to be better with CJ Stroud. And it was. Again, I get Diggs is there. I think there's a chance Diggs ends up number 3 in the pecking order. Tank Dell number 2. And Nico Collins. Nico, cousin, let's go bowling at number 1. At number 24, we got Devontae Adams, wide receiver of the Las Vegas. Turn your volume down. Raiders. Underdog ADP, pick 17. Underdog Fantasy ADP, wide receiver 14, pick 19.2. I have Devontae Adams ranked lower than aggregate ADP for one reason. Devontae Adams definitely could finish as a top 12 receiver. But is he going to win you your league, right? Is he going to burn you fucking Anakin on Mustafar style if you don't draft him? I don't think so. I think his ceiling on a run-heavy Raiders offense is like the wide receiver 10, which he was last season. Wide receiver 15 in PPR points per game, tied with Ayuk and Michael Pittman. Again, Devontae Adams is very talented. One of the best receivers in the NFL still at his age. But he's on a team that wants to run the ball, and he's on a team whose quarterback is either Gardner fucking Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. Again, with shitty quarterback play last year, he ranked 2nd in targets, 9th in receptions, 15th in receiving yards, and 11th in total touchdowns with 8. If he finished with similar stats, if he's a Raider, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Now, if he gets traded to the fucking Jets, I'm going to change my tune. I'm going to go from FM to AM, right? I'm completely changing stations, or I guess I don't know how that fucking shit works. I don't use the radio. I have Spotify. No free ads. But Devontae Adams would be way better on the Jets because I feel confident that Rodgers is going to force feed him the ball, and I just think the upside's higher in New York than it is on a very run-heavy team of the Raiders with a head coach that you know wants to run the ball. Again, is Devontae Adams going to potentially make me look slightly foolish ranking him at 24? Maybe if he finishes as like the wide receiver 10 because I've got him ranked outside the top 12 receivers, but I don't see him breaking me, right? I don't see him grabbing me like a baseball bat and fucking smashing me, paws on his knee, like when an MLB player gets angry and they smash their bat, right? 8th in dominated rating, 1st in unrealized air yards. The quarterback situation might be slightly better, but again, it's not enough to move me. Okay? It's not like he's going from Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell to fucking Patrick Mahomes or like Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, right? Josh Allen. No, he's going from fucking Aiden O'Connell and Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy G Spot, Jimmy Pornstar, either Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew's fine, right? We saw it in Indianapolis last year. But it's not like Gardner Minshew is the second coming of like Patrick Mahomes. So I think Davante Adams is going to be fine. Again, I think he could outperform where I'd be drafting him. But he just feels like a really safe pick, right? Again, like compared to Nico Collins, DJ Moore, he's way safer. So if you want to be safer, rank him higher. But I could see Nico Collins really balling. Everything goes right, top 8, right? DJ Moore, same thing. Davante Adams, with the Raiders, like with how much they want to run the rock, I just don't see it for Davante Adams. Again, he'll be fine. But the upside to me just isn't really there. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you guys did end up enjoying, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. I love all of you guys from deep down in my heart. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. Check out Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great one. And I'll see you guys soon with another banger of a video. Love you guys. Have a great one. As always, good boy.